A rare and dramatic event is unfolding in Washington, D.C., one that is sending shockwaves through the city and across the nation. The Capitol, long a symbol of American democracy and stability, now finds itself at the center of an unprecedented federal action. On August 11, 2025, President Donald Trump declared a public safety emergency, launching a sweeping federal intervention in the city. The announcement, made from the White House, was broadcast live and immediately became the top story on every major news outlet. Reporters and cameras crowded the White House lawn, capturing the gravity of the moment as the president outlined his plan. The president's plan is bold and controversial. Deploy the National Guard and take temporary control of the city's police force to combat what he described as a surge in violent crime and homelessness. Military vehicles rolled into the city, and National Guard soldiers took up positions near key federal buildings, signaling a dramatic shift in the city's security landscape. This move puts local law enforcement under direct federal authority, a step that's drawn national attention to D.C.'s unique status as a federal district. For many, it raises questions about the balance of power between local and federal government and what it means for the city's autonomy. The president argues these extraordinary measures are needed to restore order and protect residents, workers, and tourists. He insists that the safety of the nation's capital is paramount and that decisive action is required to address the challenges facing the city. The action has sparked a nationwide debate about the rights of D.C. to govern itself and the president's power to intervene. Across the city, people are gathering in protest and discussion, voicing concerns about civil liberties, local representation, and the precedent this sets for future federal involvement in local affairs. The presence of soldiers on city streets and a new police command will immediately impact daily life in the capital. Commuters, families, and business owners are adjusting to increased security, checkpoints, and a heightened sense of uncertainty as the city adapts to this new reality. As the situation unfolds, understanding the facts and legal basis for this move is crucial to grasping its significance. The coming days will test the resilience of Washington, D.C., and challenge the nation to reflect on the delicate balance between security, democracy, and the rights of its citizens. President Trump justified his intervention as a response to what he described as a growing crisis of crime and public disorder in Washington, D.C. According to the president, the city was facing an unprecedented wave of violence and lawlessness that local authorities seemed unable to contain. He argued that the safety of both residents and federal employees was at risk, and that the situation had reached a tipping point. He described the city as overrun by violent gangs and criminal networks, painting a picture of neighborhoods plagued by shootings, theft, and drug activity. Trump warned that this surge in crime threatened not just the daily lives of D.C. residents, but also the operations of the federal government itself, given the city's unique status as the nation's capital. The executive order claims that local leaders and city officials have failed to control the rising violence, leaving the federal government with no choice but to step in. Trump's administration argued that federal action was not only justified, but essential to restore order and protect the integrity of the Capitol. In addition to concerns about crime, Trump linked his plan to a broader effort to beautify the Capitol. He promised to clear homeless encampments from parks and sidewalks, pledging to improve the city's image for residents, workers, and visitors alike. The president argued that these encampments contributed to a sense of disorder and insecurity. He framed homelessness as a public safety issue, insisting that removing encampments from public spaces would make the city safer and more welcoming. Trump's plan called for increased law enforcement and city cleanup efforts, with the goal of reclaiming public areas for all citizens. Supporters of the president see this as a bold and necessary move to address problems they believe have been ignored or mishandled by local officials. They argue that federal intervention is the only way to bring about real change and restore a sense of safety and pride in the Capitol. The president's message is clear: reclaim control, restore order, and ensure that Washington, D.C. reflects the values and security expected of the nation's capital. He has positioned himself as taking decisive action where others have failed. But this aggressive approach sets up a direct clash with D.C.'s elected leaders, who see the situation very differently and argue that local voices should guide the city's future. The president's plan combines military presence with federal law enforcement, 800 National Guard soldiers are being deployed, with 100-200 on duty at any time, mainly for logistics and deterrence, not regular policing. Soldiers will not patrol with rifles in hand, but weapons are nearby for self-defense. They can detain suspects until federal agents arrive. The plan also brings in over 170 federal agents from the FBI, U.S. Marshals, DEA, and ATF to target high-crime areas, especially at night. This surge is designed to quickly suppress crime and assert federal control. The deployment is temporary but signals the administration's determination to enforce its public safety agenda. Local officials who usually manage these responsibilities have been sidelined. The most controversial move is the federalization of the D.C. Metropolitan Police Department. For up to 30 days, the city's police force is under direct federal control, not the mayor's. This is allowed under the D.C. Home Rule Act during a declared emergency. The DEA administrator is now interim police commissioner, with Attorney General Pam Bondi overseeing the operation. The Trump administration can now set policing strategy and even change local laws, like cash bail rules. This power to override local statutes is a major point of contention for D.C. leaders. The takeover is legally set to expire in 30 days, unless Congress extends it. Critics call this undemocratic. Supporters say it's necessary for safety. The move has reignited debate over D.C.'s lack of statehood and vulnerability to federal intervention. D.C.'s elected officials have responded with outrage, voicing their deep frustration and concern over the federal government's recent actions. They are calling the federal intervention not only unprecedented and unjustified, but also a direct challenge to the city's autonomy and the principles of local governance. Mayor Muriel Bowser has been especially vocal, emphasizing that the city's own data shows violent crime is at a 30-year low, contradicting the narrative being pushed by federal officials. She has publicly disputed the president's claims of a crisis, insisting that the facts simply do not support such drastic measures. Bowser accuses the administration of using the city as a political pawn, suggesting that the move is more about scoring points than addressing real issues. She has pledged to fight the takeover on every front, rallying supporters and vowing to defend the city's right to govern itself. D.C. Attorney General Brian Schwalb has also stepped forward, calling the federal move unlawful and a violation of the city's legal rights. Schwalb and his legal team are preparing a robust legal challenge, determined to take the fight to the courts and defend D.C.'s autonomy. They argue that the emergency standard required for such intervention simply hasn't been met, and that the federal government is overstepping its bounds. City council members have echoed these concerns, calling the intervention an attack on D.C.'s democracy and a blatant disregard for the will of its voters. Across the city, citizens and leaders alike are rallying together, united in their demand for respect and self-determination. The unified opposition from local leaders highlights the deep and growing divide between the city's leadership and the federal government. This standoff has become a symbol of the broader struggle between local control and federal authority, with both sides refusing to back down. D.C. leaders argue that the federal intervention disrespects the city's right to self-governance, and they are preparing for what could be a lengthy legal battle. Behind closed doors, strategy meetings are underway as officials discuss their next moves and how best to regain control over the city's future. The conflict underscores the ongoing historic struggle over who should govern the nation's capital, a question that has lingered for generations. For D.C. residents, this fight is about more than just safety or policy. It's about the fundamental right to have a voice in their own government and to protect the democracy they believe in. The president's claims of a crime crisis are challenged by official D.C. police data. Violent crime has dropped 35% since 2023, with homicides and robberies both down significantly. While 2023 saw a spike, rates have since fallen and remain below the city's 1990s highs. Critics say this proves federal intervention is unnecessary and disrupts local progress. Supporters argue that even with declines, crime is still too high for the capital. They point to the 2023 spike as evidence of failed leadership. Some say statistics don't capture how safe residents feel. The debate over the numbers is central to the conflict: progress for some, persistent crisis for others. Homelessness is another key justification for the president's intervention. Yet city and nonprofit data show homelessness in D.C. has dropped nearly 20% since 2020, with family homelessness down 43%. Local initiatives focus on permanent housing and support services, credited for this progress. Community groups warn that clearing encampments will only displace vulnerable people and cut them off from help. They advocate for investment in housing and mental health, not punitive measures. The administration sees visible encampments as a public order problem and a blight on the city's image. Supporters argue removal is needed for safety and cleanliness. Opponents say it dehumanizes the homeless and ignores root causes like housing costs and mental health gaps. The president's move has split opinion along political lines. The D.C. police union supports the intervention, citing officer shortages and a broken justice system. Some Republican leaders in Congress praise the action as a needed correction. They argue local leaders have been too soft on crime, threatening public safety and federal operations. Democratic lawmakers and civil liberties groups condemn the move as political theater and an abuse of power. They plan to introduce legislation to reverse the takeover, though passage is unlikely. Polls show most D.C. residents oppose federal intervention, valuing city autonomy even as they worry about crime. The majority fear federal overreach more than local mismanagement. The debate reflects deep divisions over who should control the capital's future. President Trump's intervention in D.C. has created a high-stakes clash over crime, democracy, and the city's future. Supporters see a necessary federal rescue. Opponents see an undemocratic power grab. Official data shows crime and homelessness are declining, but public perception and political narratives differ sharply. The president's executive order is legal under the Home Rule Act, but critics question whether emergency conditions truly exist. The conflict highlights the tension between statistics and perception, legal authority and democracy. D.C.'s fragile autonomy as a federal district is once again in the spotlight. The intervention has reignited calls for D.C. statehood and self-governance. The coming weeks will reveal the impact on the city and the courts. But the debate over who governs Washington, D.C. is far from over.